Hello, everyone. It's AstroPath, Laurie and Jennie. Jennie from Hidden Path, Laurie from AstroLore. You can find below the video all our links to social media. Please subscribe and like and share and do all those good things to help us get seen out there. And today we're here just for a brief, we hope, video about the Leo full moon that is happening on February 5th.
That's right. 1:28 p.m. Eastern time. For your
Okay.
information.
Yeah. So a few things just to cover is, first of all, the cycles. You want to just quickly go over the phases of the moon, Jennie? Most people listening to us know all about this, but just quickly.
Let's do it. Yeah, we like to compare the moon phase cycle to the plant cycle because it's just a helpful metaphor. So basically, at the new moon that we had 2 weeks ago on January 21st, we planted the seed on the new moon in Aquarius. So it's like the seed state. And then that seed breaks open and starts to grow. And a week later, we have the first quarter moon, which is a time of a lot of growth, and it's very dynamic. And there's usually some sort of crisis or action that needs to be taken. And then a week later, you come here, which is the full moon, the full culmination of that cycle. And in the plant cycle, it's kind of like when the flower has come out. Now you're like, oh, that's what's growing. Okay. So you kind of get this beautiful moment of like, oh, like this opening moment. And that's really what the full moon is. And I think everybody knows the full moon. Like you look up in the sky and you're like, oh, there's this beautiful silver orb, like look at that. So we really get to see that at the full moon. And then a week later, we go to the last quarter moon. And then the whole cycle closes down with the balsamic moon and we start again. The first half of the cycle is concerned with building something up. The second half is about meaning and letting go of the structures that we created in the first half.
Right.
So
and
what do you want to add to that?
The only thing I want to add to that is that's the short cycle. There's also the longer full year cycle where this full moon kind of harkens us back to the Leo new moon, which was on July 28th, 2022. So, the seed we plant at the full moon, at the new moon, grows for 2 weeks into the full moon and then for 6 months into the larger cycle full moon. So this full moon goes to both of those new moons. I hope I got that right. Now, so yeah, that's all I really wanted to add to that part.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that sounds great. So I like those bigger cycles too, because it's just like life happens in bigger increments.
So, right. I mean, 2 weeks for the planting of a seed and the growth of something is pretty quick, and if you're working on really quick little things, that's great. But in bigger projects, bigger things going on in our lives, we need a little more time to allow things to unfold. Do you want to take a look at the chart?
Yeah, so I think that the next step is to talk a little bit about the chart, the polarity between Leo and Aquarius, and also I know Laurie has some really interesting things to share about the eclipse cycle, because this moon ties in with our eclipse cycle this year, which is in fixed signs.
Yeah, okay. It's really interesting because we've got this full moon right here is at 16 degrees Aquarius. So this is exactly at the midpoint of the lunar eclipse that happened at 16 degrees of Taurus on November 8th, 2022. And that was conjunct Uranus. And next on May 5th, 2023, we will be having another lunar eclipse at 15 degrees Scorpio opposite Uranus. And this full moon right at the midpoint is square Uranus. So this full moon is really significant in that it really shines a light on these huge changes of the eclipse cycles as well. And bringing in Uranus is just, it's a very interesting little pattern.
Yeah. So just a little bit about Uranus. It's the great disruptor or the awakener, and it often does the same, both those things in the exact moment, right? But what we're seeing, it's really reflective of a lot of the changes we're seeing around us, the changes in some of the structures of our society, the changes in things like our food systems and supply chains, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of ways we can look
Money.
at that symbolism. Yeah, money, the way money has shifted, anything tangible, resources oriented, and in with Uranus, it's change. So this brings a very dynamic full moon that is, it's personal to the degree that a Leo full moon can really shine a light on some very personal topics, but is impersonal in the fact that, well, we're in Aquarius season. Saturn's part of that Aquarius profile. So those are one of those, the bigger outer planets making a statement about the culture at large. And then with the square to Uranus, well, now you have this transpersonal planet that is activating this full moon. So there's always a personal impact, but in this case, we're really looking at some big transpersonal issues and how our personal stories play into the larger tapestry of society. And our stories are threads within that society. So it's a very interesting moon. And we're going to talk about it in terms of change. But I guess we should talk more about Leo and Aquarius, huh? As a polarity.
Oh yeah. Let's talk
Good
about
idea.
Leo. Let's talk about Leo and Aquarius.
Mhm.
Leo is the most personal sign. It is ruled by the sun. It is really about generosity and open-heartedness and playfulness and drama, and it's big and it's dramatic and it's ruled by the sun.
Yeah. Against Aquarius, which is totally the opposite. I mean, Aquarius is, it's in the northern hemisphere, it's the winter, so it's far, far away from a warm, sunny place, right?
Right.
And in Aquarius season, we're looking at collective issues. We're looking at humanitarian causes. We're looking at, it's not so personal. It's all
Right.
about the high view. I think of it in some ways as like the hawk or the eagle that's flying high above, and it can see the whole picture, and it can even see into the future. It can see the curve of the earth. I mean, it's this really high impersonal view, and it's really helpful to have that view to pull us out of our personal lives. But it's also the total opposite of this warm kind of hearth fire of Leo, which is why it's a full moon. They're opposite.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So it really does put the personal and the collective both in high relief. We see that, one of the great things about the full moons or any opposition, really, anytime two planets are at opposing points, there's a clarity of view between them. So you can think about a full moon as, it's the full illumination of what began at the new moon. It's the full view. When you're opposite someone, if you're sitting at a huge round table, the person opposite you have the clearest view of. And then with Uranus at that square point, there's like this tension. It's sort of like there's tension between the opposition. There's tension in that view. And then Uranus comes in and is really kind of playing a dance between them.
Yeah, and almost like magnetizing the energy away from the normal, looking opposite the table. It's kind of pulling this energy in this other place. It makes it much more dynamic and alive, and maybe unpredictable too.
Unpredictable, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, anytime you add Uranus to anything, you get unpredictability, you get anxiety and or excitement.
Yeah.
So there's a lot in here to celebrate and to be aware of.
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking, so Leo, just talk a tiny bit about Leo. I like to think about Leo as where you kind of get square with your true self, where you know who you are in your heart, because I think of it as such a heart-centered sign. And that when you really know that, you don't need to be in an egocentric place about it. You don't need to, like the Leo that you hear the bad things about, that's like, hey, everybody look at me, is like, that's really the most insecure Leo. where they don't know who they are. They don't know what's in their heart. So the using of Leo energy is about knowing your true self. And when you do that, you can almost instantaneously reflect that back to the people around you, the society around you, and reflect that warmth and a sense of gratitude and celebration outside of yourself. And so that's a lot of what I think is a way to use this polarity, is to really get square with yourself. Don't get self-absorbed. Just kind of go, wow, cool. Like, I've got this. These are these things that I am truly good at and I can work with. And now I can reflect back out into the other part of my life where that sun is situated. And that's what I think we'll kind of talk about it in that way, in the personal impact section. But
it's really interesting, because wherever that full moon falls in your chart is the house that holds Leo, and that is the house where you are most truly yourself, really, because the sun, regardless of where your sun is, it rules the house that holds Leo. So it's a place that's very personal for you.
Yes. Yes. And it's really, I mean, it's an interesting time. And it's kind of like, in a nutshell, it's like, what do you need to celebrate and have gratitude for in the face of all this disruption and change that we're all dealing with?
Right. Right. Okay. Is there anything else before we go on to the personal impacts?
No, I mean, well, just real quick. We had the new moon on January 21st. The sun was conjoined with the moon, and then the moon has traveled over all those other planets. It's traveled over Saturn and Venus and Neptune and Jupiter and Uranus and Mars, and now it's standing alone, having absorbed the energies of those things. So this is another reason why this moon is so dynamic. And the last two things that absorbed were the action of Mars and the disruption and awakening of Uranus. So it's a very active full moon.
Yeah, it is really interesting to think about the moon that way, as it picks up the energy of the planets as it passes over them. And with its most recent, like you said, it picked up Uranus and then Mars, and Mars having just recently gone direct. Mars is really moving forward now, and the moon going over it is kind of helping it along its way.
Nice.
So now we come to this position, and it is funny to think about. I mean, if you look at this, whoa.
Oh, sorry. I thought we were here. I'll pop it back up. I thought.
Okay. Well, we were. That's okay. It's just interesting that it picked up. I can't even remember what I was saying now, but it picked up that Mars, and now it's. Oh, I know what I was saying. Just that the moon is so opposite everything. It's really it's kind of holding everything in its view.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty interesting how that's gone. And now I think we're ready to move on to the personal impacts. Are we?
Okay. Yeah, I'm ready. Sorry if I messed it up, but we're good.
No problem at all. I was just like, what happened? Okay. So we are going to go to our personal impacts.
Mm-hmm.
I see we're not even at the right spot here to start. Here we go.
Props.
Okay. So now for those of you with Aries rising, I'm going to just let you talk about it, Jennie.
We're going to attempt to keep this pretty simple. So those of you with Aries rising, you've been experiencing dramatic change in your values, your sense of self-worth, perhaps something to do with money for the past few years, since 2018, really. And with all those changes in your values at this full moon, you now have an opportunity to look at the polarity of how you give and receive love. This is your creative giving of love and how you receive love from your community. So ask yourself, how have the changes in my values, how are they impacting this area of my life? How are they impacting how I give love, how I receive love, how I interact with my community? And am I in touch with my creative power? What creative projects am I working on?
It's interesting to think about that, just as the generosity of giving and how that reflects on your community and vice versa. And what you have changed in your value system really supports your giving and receiving of love. I guess that's exactly what you said. I just said it again.
No, it's great. It's good. And it's a good reminder that at this full moon, which is just a moment in time, take a moment to have some gratitude for that playful energy in your life, whether
Yeah.
that's children that you love that bring that out in you, whether it's a creative project that you're joyfully immersed in, or whether it's some kind of like risk-taking thing that's brought you a lot of joy. Take a moment and have that and celebrate that at the full moon.
Right. And think about, what was the seed you planted 2 weeks ago or 6 months ago? That seed would have been in the area of community. And now you can see it from the perspective of how you give. So I think that's about it. Aries rising, enjoy this one. This full moon is in your fifth house. And because you have Leo in your fifth house, it's a really, really personal area for you. It's such a playful, fun area. This is really a full moon for you to enjoy, I would say. Okay. Now, moving on, we're going to go to those of you with Taurus rising.
Yeah. So those of you with Taurus rising, you've been experiencing a great deal of change, movement, perhaps disruption, awakening in the first house of self. So this is a very personal shift. Like the way that you meet the world has been going through a profound set of changes. And now at this full moon, you have a moment to reflect on how has that impacted your family life? How has that impacted your career? How do those two pieces work together? And what are you doing differently that you weren't doing a few years ago? And so take this moment to really celebrate that. Have a sense of gratitude, perhaps, for your family life, especially the folks who've supported you and helped see you through this change, because that's really what you're seeing with these forces in play here.
Yeah. You've been through a lot of very, very personal change. And with, Leo being in your fourth house, that area of your home and family is such a personal area where, it's natural for you to shine your brightest in that area. So this is a time to really illuminate that, allow that to illuminate your outer world and vice versa, really bringing that gratitude and generosity to your home and your family.
Yeah,
That's
and
beautiful.
I think that's really well said, Laurie. Because it's reminding me too that you've also probably been getting some lessons in that 10th house. So maybe hasn't been the easiest place. Like things in your career have been testing you a bit. Extra reason to feel really a sense of gratitude towards your family life, your home, the people who make it home, the place where you can set your feet on the ground.
For some reason, I'm just overcome with this idea of painting your kitchen bright yellow. I don't know why. At any rate. Okay. So now for those of you with Gemini rising, what's happening for these folks, Jennie?
Oh, this is a great question.
Ooh, yeah.
So those of you with Gemini rising have been experiencing a great deal of change and shifting in an area of life that's not very easy to kind of grapple with. It's this behind the scenes area. There's been changes to do with your unconscious patterns, those subconscious things that perhaps impede you, get in your way. You've had an opportunity to really redo that. Through that, you may have had some struggles. You may have had some suffering or some illness or feelings of being alone over the course of the last few years, because you've really been dealing with that since 2018. And now at this full moon, you have a moment to kind of ask yourself, how have these profound behind the scenes changes affected my communication, my thinking, how I talk and how I learn? Because it's really had a profound ripple effect in those two areas of your life, the way that you look at the world, and again, how you communicate. So at this Leo full moon, take a moment and really get in touch with a sense of gratitude about how you communicate, what you have learned in the last few years that are allowing you to navigate your immediate environment more easily and with more joy.
Yeah, and that it could also, the generosity that you can bring here at this Leo new moon can be through your communication. It can also be really directed towards siblings or neighbors, those kind of simple relationships. There's you're thinking about these deep inner changes and how they may have changed your relationships with those people and your relationships. There may be real changes that have come about from those internal changes around your worldview and how you communicate that. The area of communication, siblings, that third house with Leo there, that's an area that you are very connected to on a very, very personal level. So, show your gratitude in direct conversation with those people that hold that space, siblings, neighbors, bring a little gift to the cashier at the grocery store.
Oh, I like that. That's really nice. Yeah. So during Aquarius season, there's been such a focus on just, I don't know, the critical thinking, really. That's kind of what the overall lesson has been about.
Yeah. Your critical thinking and how it has been developed out of those internal changes. There's been a lot going on there for a couple of years now. A lot of intensity, and this kind of brings that overview down into this personal conversation that you may need to have.
Nice.
That's interesting. Okay, so now moving on to those with Cancer rising. What do we got going on here, Jennie?
Cancer rising. So there's been a lot of change for Cancer rising folks in the area of community. This is groups. So it could be groups of friends, it could be groups of colleagues, it could be different groups and community members that you interact with over time. There's been a big shift in how you deal with this. Some of it pertains to how you receive love, how you let other people support you. There has been some change in this area. And now at this full moon, you really have the opportunity to see or to ask yourself, how has that change in groups impacted how I value myself and how I deal with the shared values of other people? As I navigate these relationships that are actually supportive relationships and I'm bumping into other people's baggage, how am I dealing with that better? How am I able to set better boundaries in this time frame? Those are some of the questions you want to ask yourself. And in this moment, Leo, this personal place that your sun rules, there's a moment of time to celebrate yourself, to have gratitude for the resources that you have, for the value that you bring to the table as you deal with these community relationships. So enjoy that. Take that moment to do that. Give yourself some kudos for that.
Yeah, I really like that. There's been so much with Uranus in the 11th and Saturn having been moving through this 8th. There's been a lot of stress between that, how to navigate other people's stuff and the changes that are happening in your community. You can see how those can be having a challenging conversation between the two of them. And at this moment in time, you really bring yourself forward, your own value of yourself, to reflect back on what you've learned through this time.
Nice. Those of you with Cancer rising, there's definitely been some personal work here going. There's been a couple years of lessons about boundaries, that's for sure.
Yeah, that is so much around boundaries and understanding, really having a strong handle on your own values. And with Leo ruling that second house, that's an area where I always think of wherever Leo is in the chart is where we can be most true to ourselves. Because the sun, regardless of where our personal sun is, the sun rules that area of the chart. So it's a very important place to bring this sense of generosity at this new moon. Yeah. Kudos to yourself. Be generous with yourself. Let someone else pick up the tab while you show yourself some generosity. Okay. So that's what I would say for that. Okay. So now let's move on to those of you with Leo rising.
Well, Leo rising. So, folks with Leo rising, there has been dramatic change in your profession in these past few years. Uranus has been in your 10th house since 2018. So, there's been a lot of disruption and change and moving around. And as that has happened, you now have a moment of time at this full moon to ask yourself, how has that changed my awareness of who I am and how I interact with others on a personal one on one level? That's really what the full moon is bringing into full focus. With Leo rising, your sun rules your whole chart, so that first house is a very important house for Leo rising folks. So you really have a moment to pause and be generous to yourself, express some gratitude for the awareness that you've gained, and express some gratitude for those one-on-one partnerships and relationships, whatever they are, even if they're ones that you had to have a breakup, they still taught you something. So this is a moment to celebrate that, but to really kind of, hold your own heart as your big open heart. So
Yeah, that Leo rising, it's such a person. This is such a very, very personal full moon. And to really consider, what's been the challenge of the upheaval, the change in the career? How has that also really brought change to your relationships, and allowing yourself to really celebrate yourself and be really generous in the face of this? That's lovely.
Nice.
Big changes.
Yeah.
Changes. This full moon just really reflects the changes of the eclipses, the last one and the next one here at this midpoint. It's just very interesting. And with it ruling your first house, it's very, very personal to you.
Yeah, and it's just like how each individual's reflecting these collective changes. So it's an interesting time, powerful time.
Yeah. How are you personally reflecting within your relationship as well, the bigger overriding changes of the culture? Pretty interesting. Okay, so now we're going to move on to those of you with Virgo rising.
Okay, let's dive in here. So with Virgo rising, those of you with Virgo rising have been experiencing some change over the past few years in your worldview. So this is how you think critically, how you take on board foreign points of view and let it expand your mind. So there's been a big change here. With Virgo rising. And it's really interesting because at this full moon, you now have a chance to sort of ask yourself and assess, how have those changes in my worldview impacted my spirituality and my routines? How do I incorporate, these spiritual concepts into my daily routines that support my health, both physical and mental health? That it's like how you eat, how you exercise, those kinds of things. So now is a moment to really celebrate, have a moment of gratitude for whatever, wherever you are in that spiritual process of kind of grappling with those bigger issues that are harder to even talk about or describe. So take a moment to really celebrate that.
It's interesting because anyone with Virgo rising has Leo ruling their 12th house. And that's kind of an interesting place to have Leo. You think about Leo, wherever Leo is in the chart, I always think of it as a place where you can be most true to yourself, because the sun, regardless of where the sun is in your own chart, it rules that area of your chart. So how is that you can be most true to yourself through this internal process? I always kind of think of it as people with Virgo rising are most true to themselves when they're all alone and they close the door and they've got that solitude. And I think, really bringing a generosity to the self, of allowing the self that alone time. And I feel like that really connects with the changes in the worldview. As the worldview changes, you kind of have to navigate your own alone time to process those changes.
Yeah, and it's kind of like during Aquarius season, you have this window of time to figure out, how do I incorporate enough alone time in my routines? Or the flip side of that is, if you spend most of your time alone, how do you allow some connection with others so that you're not totally alienated?
Absolutely.
It's that dance, I think, that this is showing.
Oh, that's beautiful, Jenny. That's perfect. Yes, it is navigating that dance. Because being alone all the time is not necessarily a good idea, even if you happen to have 100 planets in the 12th house. But yeah, that's an interesting point. Okay, I think we've covered that one.
Yeah.
Let's go on to those of you with Libra rising. Where does that put our story here, Jenny?
Oh, Libra rising. I know Libra risings like things to be all harmonious and copacetic. However, you have had Uranus, the planet of change, in the house where you're dealing with other people's stuff all the time. So this is that. I always think of this as like the stuff, it's like an iceberg. It's the stuff below the level of the water where you can't see and you bump into things. So you, Libra rising, have been learning or getting some big changes in how you navigate stuff with other people, what boundaries you set, what are you doing as you navigate change here? And as you do that, and this has been happening since 2018. So now with this full moon, you have a question to ask yourself, which is, how have those changes and how I deal with other people's stuff impacted how I connect with a community and how I express my love and creativity to other people? So it's really a moment of time, I think, to feel a sense of gratitude for the community you have where that full moon is landing, because it's really sort of saying, hey, I'm going through all this change, and look at what's happened in my community, and thank goodness that they have been here while I've been navigating all this change. And you're letting yourself receive that.
Right. It's really a time where you can see very clearly how the boundaries that you have been learning to set through the disruption of Uranus being in that house, you've been learning how to set better boundaries, hopefully. And this moment in time really shows you how those changes allow you to express your love and receive love from the community. That's really beautiful how those come together.
Nice. Yeah, I really like that. Because with also Libra rising too, like, you've had some lessons the last couple of years about staying in touch with your creative process. And so this is a time where you really get to kind of touch in on that.
Yeah. And how is your creative process impacted by your ability or the necessity of putting in those boundaries? Because boundaries are not an easy thing for Libra rising. Libra wants to keep everything steady. But, thinking also about, the generosity of that Leo moon, and wherever Leo is a place where we can be more fully ourselves because the sun rules that area. So really, paying attention to bringing generosity to your community at this full moon is going to be important. Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's move on then to those of you with Scorpio rising. What do we have for a story here, Jenny?
Well, those of you with Scorpio rising have been experiencing a lot of change in how you do partnerships. This change has been going on since 2018. You've had an opportunity to awaken to a new way of being in partnership, basically. And this is with, this can be in a marriage, this can be a business partnership, this can be just how you interact with your therapist, or, really with anyone. It's those one-on-one connections in the moment. So as you've been experiencing dramatic change in how you do this, it's really giving you an opportunity to ask yourself, how has that change in my partnerships affected my career? How is it affecting my home life? And at this full moon, great moment to feel the gratitude that you have towards your profession, the connections you've made in your profession, because this is a place where you really get to shine, because your sun rules this area of your life. So you have a moment in time with the full moon to celebrate that, and also recognize, what have you learned about your home life too? Because there's been some new things come to light, some lessons to be learned about your home life. So there's a really dynamic pattern at this full moon that you're going to get to see pretty clearly.
Yeah, it's very dynamic being in those angular houses. There's
Mhm.
just so much, you think about the disruption around relationships and how much. I mean, if your personal one-on-one relationships are in a pattern of change, it's going to clearly impact your home, because there's people probably living in your home that you're in a relationship with, and your career, because there's probably people there that you're interacting with. So, really using those changes to question and really think about what changes have brought, and how you're navigating that polarity between home and family. With Leo ruling that 10th house, your career is a place where you really are very personally committed to, most probably. I always think of wherever Leo is a place where we can really be true to ourselves, because the sun rules that, regardless of what sign the sun is in your chart. If you've got Scorpio rising, your sun rules your 10th house. It rules your career. You can really express yourself most fully there. So for now, for this moment in time, really bringing the generosity to the people in your home life and your career that maybe have been through some rocky times in the past few years.
Nice. Yeah.
Okay.
Enjoy.
All right. Yeah. So now what we're going to do is we're going to move on to those of you with Sagittarius rising. What's our story here?
Well, those of you with Sagittarius rising, you've been experiencing some sort of profound change in your area of routines. So this is your day-to-day living. This is the things that you do to keep everything going. How you get yourself to work, how you eat, how you exercise, your practices. Do you meditate? Those kinds of things. And there's been some kind of dramatic change in how you do this since 2018, really, because there's been a lot going on there since then. At this full moon, you really get an opportunity to see how has that change in your routines impacted the way that you think critically, the way that you view the world, and also how you communicate and how you learn. I mean, there's been a very dynamic shift in how you do these things. I mean, these three houses are very much tied in with how you learn, how you communicate, how you think, these very cerebral kinds of patterns. So right now at the full moon, you have a wonderful opportunity to really have some gratitude for your wonderful open mind, because that's really what you have with Leo rising. I'm sorry, with Sagittarius rising, but with Leo in that ninth house.
Yeah. With Leo in that ninth house, that is such an area of personal expression. I mean, you're really yourself in that area. You really are able to shine a light there. So yeah, bringing generosity. It's really interesting to think about the upheaval that has probably been going on for some time there in that sixth house. And with where we're at in the world, I just wonder, many of you probably have had some health concerns over this period of time. The sixth house often brings in issues around health concerns, and certainly having health concerns impacts how we see the outside world, and really understanding how to speak to those changes in our critical thinking. It's interesting to think about the whole, if we connect this to what's going on in the world and has been for these years. It's pretty interesting to think about how that might play out in different people's lives.
Yeah, and the other interesting piece to the Sagittarius rising is that, on that scale of bigger things happening, there has been some significant lessons around your communication in the last couple of years. So something really new has come in here, and some, way you've been forced to kind of look at, to be honest, your mind, your mindset, what with all of those, because those are all very cerebral mind functions, that are happening in these three places. So
yeah, it's pretty interesting. There has definitely been some stress with Saturn in here as well. between those two areas. But yeah, just bringing a generosity of your worldview is really significant here. Okay, so now we are going to move on to those of you with Capricorn rising.
Oh, yeah. So
Oh, yeah.
Capricorn, you have been experiencing some profound change in the way that you give love. Uranus has been in this house since 2018. So this is quite a few years to kind of grapple with, what is your gift to the world? How do you want to give love? How do you work with playfulness? Have you been able to kind of break up some old stagnant patterns in this area of life and enjoy things more? I think there's a question around that. At this full moon, you get to think about or ask yourself, how have those changes impacted how I value myself, how I show up for other people in their intense stuff and have good boundaries with them, where I can be there, but I don't get enmeshed with people. There's something about those topics, the way that you give love and allowing you to grapple with your own values and the values of other people. So reflect on those topics. And in particular, give yourself some gratitude, some kudos for how much you're worth. Like, you are a valuable person, Capricorn rising.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting. Capricorn rising, anybody with Capricorn rising, there's such a seriousness to the nature. And then with Uranus going through that fifth house, I get this sense of it's trying to teach you how to have fun. There's a real lesson in how to allow yourself to have fun, with Saturn having been moving through your second for some time. So there's been a real learning curve there around how to allow yourself to feel worthy of having more pleasure in your life. That's an interesting one.
Yeah, and just, taking authority over your own inner worth, and standing your ground, so that you are able to really celebrate even those very challenging people that come into your life that you have to set your boundaries with. They have helped you understand even more about yourself. So great time to express that gratitude.
Yeah, it's fun to think about Leo being in that eighth house. You are able to really be yourself in the face of those navigations of difficult relationship dynamics. So, you're good there. Celebrate it. Celebrate your ability to navigate other people's stuff. Okay.
All right.
Now we're going to move on from there to those of you with Aquarius rising.
Nice. Okay. Well, so those of you with Aquarius rising, you have had the planet Uranus in the fourth house of home and house for many years, since 2018. So this represents like a change or disruption or an awakening that has to do with where you set your roots. Whether those are relationships with family members, whether that's a physical place, a physical house, or even land. Those are all the places that you've experienced some shift. It could mean that you've had to relocate a bunch of times. Maybe you're buying a house. I don't know. There's different ways that can manifest. But right now at this full moon, you have the opportunity to really kind of welcome in, how has that change affected you? How has it affected your core identity, the image you put out into the world, and how you interact with people on a one-on-one basis? As you've become more adept at dealing with the change in that fourth house, it has changed your fundamental identity and your ability to, really work with other people. So ask yourself what that change has been. And really celebrate, throw some gratitude, some love the way of anyone that you're in one-on-one relationship with that you are truly grateful for, the way that they've supported you or helped you learn these lessons.
Yeah, this is a really interesting one with that Uranus in the fourth house. Those changes, they might be, like you said, around moving. It could be, members of your family, people have moved in or moved out. So many things can change, and really holding all that. These are all in angular houses. This is very, very personal and very direct to you. And yeah, you've been through a lot in the last few years. And yet with Leo on that seventh house, in that seventh house, your relationships are such a personal place. And like Jennie said, just really bringing gratitude to those relationships is how you want to celebrate this full moon. Just do it up. Do it up.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay, so we're going to move from that. Whoops, I'm making a mess here. We're going to move that to those of you with Pisces rising.
That's right. So Pisces rising, we have a little snafu here.
Oh,
Uranus
yes, we did.
actually, but it's not a problem. Uranus is actually down in your third house with Pisces rising, which means that you have been grappling with some kind of change. Ooh, nice fix. To do with how you communicate. This also could have an impact on siblings, close friends, neighbors. Those are all third house issues. So there's been some massive change and disruption and even awakening to do with how you kind of navigate these daily parts of your life. In some ways it's a simple house, but in another way it's not, because it's how you talk and communicate with everybody. So that's where the big change has been. That's the big news. At the full moon, you really have an opportunity to think about how has that change impacted my routines? How has it impacted my spirituality? Like, what are the changes? Like, what's the ripple effect of those major changes in how I learn, how I think, how I communicate? Right. So that's what you're looking at. It's a great time to think about what you are grateful for in terms of the routines you have. Perhaps you have a really wonderful meditation practice. Perhaps you feel really good about the way you eat, something, or the way you exercise, whatever it is, celebrate it. Celebrate what you do well here, because Pisces rising, you need some structure. So celebrate that and enjoy it.
Yeah. Celebrate that and celebrate it in a real manner. I want you to, make an appointment for a massage or something like that, really celebrating it, bringing a lot of generosity to yourself in honoring how you care for your body. And that will as well really support your inner life.
Nice. And also it's a very good chance that you've had some real lessons in that spiritual life, for lack of a better word. That 12th house means a lot of things. It's your unconscious patterns, it's your hidden enemies, your self-undoing. So those are often the patterns that trip you up. And Saturn has been in that 12th house for a couple of years and has been teaching you some real lessons about that. So it's a very dynamic time to really reflect on how you learn and how you're interacting with the world.
And what is going on in your unconscious and how it is reflected into your routines, your day-to-day way you live your life. So there you have it. And I think we're ready to wrap that up. Let's see if I can close this down. And thank you, Jennie, for kind of holding us together here.
Thank you too.
We will do another one of these in 2 weeks for the next new moon.
Sounds good. Thank you very much for listening.